There were 3 wine glasses on the counter. Only 2 of us live in the house. That's not how I found out, though. That was just the first time I ignored the obvious. The second time, when she laughed at my playlist in the car and said, "You and my sister would vibe better. Same boring taste. Maybe try her instead." She said it like a joke, the kind of joke that only stings if there's truth behind it. And there was. Enough to keep me staring out the window for the rest of the ride, pretending I didn't hear her. I should have responded. Should have said something clever or cold or decisive. But like always, I froze. Like a coward. Or maybe like a man who already knew the game was over and was just waiting to see how badly it would end. The day I actually messaged her sister, it wasn't planned. I was at the grocery store, standing in front of the cereal aisle like a malfunctioning robot. Couldn't even decide between granola or Raisin Bran. Pathetic, right? A grown man, paralyzed by fiber options. That's when Geneva texted me. "You still alive over there? Darla said you've been quiet lately." I stared at that message for a full minute. Not because it was weird, but because it was the first time in weeks someone asked about me. Not about what I forgot to buy, or how I was too slow or too predictable. Just me. So I replied, "Define alive." That kicked it off. A dozen texts turned into 100, then voice messages, then calls. Then one day she said something that gutted me. "You don't sound boring to me. You sound lonely." I didn't cheat that day, or the day after, but I stopped pretending my marriage was anything more than a formality. The next time my wife said it, in front of her friends this time, "Seriously, you two should just date," might be the first time Geneva picks someone as dull as herself. I didn't freeze. I smiled and said, "Maybe I will." After that night, the silence in our house started to hum. Not loud, but constant, like a machine left running in another room, something you can't see, but can't ignore either. I didn't tell Darla that I'd actually messaged Geneva. I didn't tell her we'd been talking about more than the weather or holiday plans. And I certainly didn't tell her that Geneva was the one who asked, completely unprompted, if I remembered that weekend at the cabin 5 years ago. I did. Every detail of it, actually. It had been the last time I felt like I belonged in my own marriage. Before the sarcasm turned sharp. Before the affection became obligation. Back then, Darla would laugh at my dry jokes, not roll her eyes. Back then, we still reached for each other without thinking. Geneva had come with us on that trip. I remembered how she fell asleep on the porch swing one night holding a book, and Darla whispered to me, "She's like a cat. Looks peaceful but scratches when you least expect it." Now, Geneva was the only one who didn't treat my presence like an interruption. I told myself it was harmless. We weren't flirting. Not really. Just 2 people venting, trying to understand how everything in our lives had gotten so off course. But late at night, when I'd sneak off to the garage just to listen to her voice notes, something inside me shifted. Not because she said anything scandalous, but because she said things like, "You deserve better than being someone's secondhand joke," or, "You always listen." I wish more people did. Meanwhile, Darla continued her descent into open cruelty. The next Saturday, she came home tipsy from some networking brunch and dropped her heels on the hallway floor like grenades. I was cleaning the kitchen. She sauntered in, tossed her keys on the counter, and leaned against the fridge. "You ever think maybe you missed your era?" she said. "Like you'd be a great 1950s husband. Quiet, tidy, invisible." I turned off the sink. "Why are you doing this?" She rolled her eyes, pulling her hair into a bun. "Doing what?" "This. The constant jabs. The insults. Do you even want to be married anymore?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me like I was some kind of malfunctioning appliance. Then she scoffed. "I don't want a roommate who expects a trophy for loading the dishwasher." She went to the bedroom. Shut the door. No slamming, no shouting. Just the sound of wood clicking into place. That was her answer. So I left the house. I didn't say where I was going. I just grabbed my jacket, got in the car, and started driving with no destination. Geneva lived nearly 2 hours away, and I hadn't planned to see her. I wasn't even sure if she'd be home, but my hands had their own plan. When I looked down at my GPS, it was already halfway through the route to her apartment. I parked across the street, sat there with the engine off, and stared at her building like a stalker. I even texted her, "Don't freak out. I'm outside. Not sure why. I'll go if it's weird." Her response came 30 seconds later. "You're not weird. You're welcome." She buzzed me in. Her place was small, filled with plants and books and warmth. She wore an oversized sweatshirt and had paint under her fingernails. No makeup, no filters, no rehearsed lines. When I stepped inside, she looked at me and didn't say, "What are you doing here?" She just offered me a glass of water and sat across from me, knees pulled to her chest. We didn't talk about Darla. Not at first. Geneva asked me if I remembered the storms from that cabin trip, how the power had gone out, and we'd all played cards by candlelight. She laughed, remembering how I'd accused her of cheating at Uno and how Darla had gotten weirdly mad, like she was embarrassed by my childishness. I asked her why she brought that up, and Geneva shrugged. "I guess I just remember thinking you were the only one there who didn't need to pretend." The line hung in the air like smoke. Then she asked something else. "Why did you come tonight?" I didn't lie. "Because she told me to try you." And I think she meant it. Geneva didn't flinch, didn't blink, just looked at me for a long, loaded second. Then she said softly, "And do you think you meant it?" I didn't answer, because honestly, I didn't know yet. But I stayed another hour, and I would stay longer next time. The next morning, I told Darla I had slept in the car. That was the lie I didn't regret. She didn't even lift her head from her phone, just muttered, "You're getting dramatic lately. Midlife crisis stuff?" And went back to scrolling through her feed. No questions, no suspicion, no curiosity about where I'd actually been. That stung more than being accused of anything ever could. I could have said I'd joined a cult, and she would have probably just asked me to grab oat milk on the way home. The truth I kept buried, the one I did regret, was how I didn't just talk to Geneva that night. Nothing physical happened, no lines were technically crossed, but I sat on her couch well past midnight, listening to her read me pieces of a short story she was working on, and I felt something dangerous, peace. Not excitement, not lust, just the simple comfort of being wanted near someone. That was enough to make me terrified of what I was slipping into. I kept thinking about how Darla would weaponize this if she knew. She'd spin it into a story where I was the emotionally unstable husband, desperate for attention. And maybe she wouldn't be wrong. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I used to be grounded, dependable, honest to a fault. Now I was checking my phone in the bathroom for messages from my wife's sister, like some teenage fool. Geneva didn't message me the next day. I thought that was a good sign, that maybe she'd come to her senses before I completely lost mine. But the silence gnawed at me anyway. I tried to busy myself. Did the laundry, mowed the lawn, even went to Darla's spin class to surprise her, something I hadn't done in years. I stood in the back of the room watching her laugh with some guy named Peyton, who wore a tank top 2 sizes too small and called her D. She barely acknowledged me. That night, we had one of our now standard dinners. I use the word loosely. She ordered something trendy and expensive, and I microwaved frozen lasagna. We sat in silence at opposite ends of the dining table, like two diplomats negotiating a truce neither one of us actually wanted. She broke the silence with this gem. "You seem occupied. Should I be worried?" I looked up from my plate. "You tell me." She smirked, swirled her wine. "Maybe Geneva's been texting you back." I froze. She didn't laugh, didn't follow it up. She just said it like she already knew, like she'd planted a trap weeks ago and was now watching to see if I stepped in it. My hands clenched under the table, the fork trembling slightly. "What are you playing at?" I asked. Her smile widened. "Nothing. Just thinking out loud. Honestly, I wouldn't even blame you. She's cute. Boring, but cute." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My thoughts were already spiraling into every wrong direction. Did Geneva tell her? Had she known all along? Was this some twisted game? But Darla never clarified. Just got up, kissed me on the forehead, a gesture so robotic and cold it felt like pity, and went to bed. I stayed up scrolling through old texts with Geneva, rereading every sentence, looking for traps, looking for something I'd missed. And that's when I saw it, a message I hadn't opened yet, sent hours earlier. "I think we should talk. In person. This is getting blurry." My heart sank, not because she was pulling away, but because she was right. The next day I told Darla I had a client emergency and drove to Geneva's apartment again. When she opened the door, she didn't smile. Her face was serious, soft, but unreadable. She let me in, handed me tea without asking what I wanted, and sat down across from me like we were about to conduct a formal interview. "I'm not proud of this," she said. "Not any of it. But I need to know something before we go further. And please don't lie to me." I nodded, even though my stomach was doing backflips. She looked straight at me. "If she hadn't told you to try me, would you still have ended up here?" I should have said no. I really Really should have said no. But I didn't. I said yes. And for the first time in a long time, I saw someone's heart break right in front of me. I didn't sleep that night. Geneva didn't kick me out, but she didn't exactly ask me to stay either. After I confessed the truth, that yes, I would have come to her even without Darla's cruel dare, something shifted between us. Not anger. Worse than that. Disappointment. She excused herself to the bathroom after my answer, and when she returned, her eyes were glassy but dry. We didn't speak much after that. She handed me a blanket and said, quietly, "The couch is yours. I need space." That sentence landed heavier than I expected. Not because it was unfair, it wasn't, but because for the first time, someone actually told me what they needed without cruelty or mockery. And that made the guilt worse. All of it. I laid awake staring at the ceiling, heart pounding like I'd just committed a crime. And maybe I had. Emotional trespassing. Boundary testing. Playing the victim while edging closer to becoming the villain. There's no neat word for it, but you know when you've done it. When you've stepped one foot into the dark and tried to keep the other in the light. By morning, Geneva had left early for work. There was a note on the kitchen table. "I don't hate you. I just need to remember who I am before this makes me forget." I sat at that table for almost an hour, drinking cold coffee and wondering how everything spiraled this far without a single punch thrown, no screaming, no slammed doors, just small choices adding up to a life no one could recognize anymore. When I got home, Darla was on a video call in the living room, pacing in leggings and a perfectly curated messy bun, like she'd been pulled from a catalog. She smiled at whoever was on the screen and said, "Ugh, don't even ask." He was out again, probably journaling his feelings somewhere. The moment she saw me, she ended the call mid-sentence. No apology, just looked at me and said, "Well, did the client get their emergency fixed?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her for a long moment, wondering how we ever got here, and if we were ever anything real to begin with. "Something wrong with your voice now?" she snapped. "Geneva asked me a question," I said finally. "She wanted to know if I would have ended up at her door even if you hadn't dared me to." Darla blinked, surprised. She leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "And what did you say?" I said yes. A pause. She tilted her head, studied me like I was some broken gadget she was trying to decide whether to return or throw out. Then she said, "I didn't think you had it in you." Those words knocked the air out of me. Not shock, not fury, pride. She sounded impressed, like I'd finally passed some twisted test she'd been running for years. "You wanted this to happen," I said, voice trembling. "No," she said, her tone icy. "I wanted to see what you'd do when someone finally showed you a mirror." She walked off like nothing had happened. I didn't go after her. Instead, I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and sat on the floor for a long time. My phone buzzed once. A message from Geneva. "You need to be honest with yourself before you can ever be honest with me. I can't help you with that part." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because she was right. Everything I'd done had started under the banner of being pushed, abandoned, neglected. But what I didn't want to admit, not to Geneva, not to Darla, not even to myself, was that a part of me had wanted this chaos. Had needed it, even. Because in destruction, you don't have to pretend anymore. And something told me Darla knew that all along. That night, she left the house without saying where she was going. At 3:17 a.m., a car pulled up outside. I watched from the window as she stepped out, heels in her hand, makeup smudged, and laughter still fresh on her lips. Not tipsy, not guilty, just victorious. She looked up at the house before walking in. And for the first time, I wasn't wondering who the man in the car was. I was wondering what she was planning next. The next morning, I didn't pretend anymore. I didn't make her coffee. I didn't ask how her night was. I didn't even glance at her when she passed through the kitchen wearing the same clothes she left in. I just sat at the table, staring at my cold cereal, trying to remember what it felt like when I still wanted to be chosen by her. She was humming. Not a tune. A performance. The kind of casual, satisfied melody someone hums when they think they've pulled off something flawlessly. I'd seen her act this way before, after job interviews, after friend drama, where she came out on top, after arguments with me where she twisted my words so far around I ended up apologizing for things I didn't do. But this time, she didn't need to say anything. Because I already knew she had someone. The man from the car? Just a confirmation. She wanted me to see it. She waited until the headlights faced the window, until I had no choice but to notice. It wasn't cheating hidden in shadows. It was flaunted in bright halogen beams. But the worst part wasn't that she did it. The worst part was that I didn't care. Or maybe I cared too much to let it break me. I went to work that day and stared at my monitor for 6 straight hours. Didn't respond to emails. Didn't touch my lunch. Just sat there listening to an old playlist I hadn't touched in years. Songs from the early days, when I was still naive enough to think love could fix anything if you just worked hard enough. Geneva messaged me once that afternoon. "You okay?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust myself with what I might say. That night, Darla came home late again. No excuse. No explanation. She tossed her purse on the couch and said, almost cheerfully, "Thinking of doing another wine weekend with the girls. You cool with that?" I stared at her, searching for any flicker of guilt or discomfort. Nothing. Just that smug little tilt of the head she always gave when she wanted to make me feel like I was overreacting to something unforgivable. I said, "Are you even trying to pretend anymore?" She raised an eyebrow. "Pretend what?" "That we're still married." A beat passed. Then she smiled. Not warmly, not sadly, but like someone who finally reached the part of the movie they were waiting for. "I've been waiting for you to say it," she said. "You've been walking around here like some haunted librarian. I knew it would come eventually." "You win," I said quietly. She blinked. "What? You wanted to break me. So fine. I'm broken." She looked genuinely surprised, like it wasn't as satisfying as she thought it would be. And that's when I realized something dangerous. She didn't actually want me broken. She wanted the upper hand. She wanted to control how I broke, when, and where. My surrender wasn't supposed to come quietly. It was supposed to be messy, explosive. She wanted a villain to blame. But I wasn't going to give her that. "I want you out by the end of the month," I said. "No screaming. No drama. Just go." For a moment, her mask slipped. But only for a moment. Then she said, "Fine. But I'm keeping the apartment. And the furniture. You can take your sad little desk and your cereal bowls." Done. It should have felt like defeat. But it didn't. It felt like the first honest moment we'd had in years. She walked away without another word. But before she turned the corner, she added, "Good luck with Geneva. She's even worse at pretending than you." That line landed hard. Because deep down, I'd already been wondering something I hadn't had the courage to say out loud yet. If Darla had manipulated me into this mess, how much of it had Geneva allowed herself to be part of? And what if, just what if, they weren't as different as I'd told myself they were? That night, I sat in the driveway outside Geneva's apartment for 20 minutes before texting her. "Are you free to talk? Everything's coming undone." Her reply came instantly. "Come up, but be ready. I have something to say too." Geneva opened the door without a word. No hug, no smile, not even the usual polite half-laugh she used to offer when things were awkward. She just turned and walked back into the apartment, leaving the door wide open behind her like she already knew I'd follow. I did. She was barefoot, hair tied back, no makeup, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands like she was bracing herself for something. There was a tension in the air I didn't understand at first, the kind you feel before a confession or a car crash. I sat down across from her, unsure what I was walking into. She didn't offer tea this time, didn't ask how I was. She just stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "I think I've made things worse for you. And for myself." The weight of those words took a second to settle. "What are you talking about?" I asked, heart already pounding harder than it should have been. She looked away, picked at the corner of a coaster on her table. "You remember that night we first talked for real? At the engagement dinner?" I nodded. "Of course. That wasn't random," she said. "I knew you were coming alone. Darla told me not to entertain you, but also said," she hesitated, then exhaled, "that if I did, it would be interesting to see how long you'd last." I blinked, not understanding. "Wait, what?" "She baited us," Geneva said. "She didn't just say you could try me. She was testing both of us, pushing us toward the edge. And I walked right into it." The room felt like it was shrinking. My chest tightened. My palms started to sweat. "You're saying she wanted us to get close?" "She wanted something to happen," Geneva said. "She wanted a reason. Maybe to justify what she was already doing behind your back. Maybe to feel better about how badly she was treating you. I don't know. But I didn't stop it. I let it happen because for the first time in years, someone actually listened to me." I stood up. My legs were shaking slightly, but I needed to move. I paced toward the kitchen and back, trying to make sense of what she was telling me. So this was all just a setup? No, she said quickly. That's not what I mean. I didn't plan to feel anything for you, Silas. But I did. And that's why I pulled away. That's why I stopped replying sometimes. Because I started to wonder if I was just another pawn in her game. It was too much. Too layered. Too twisted. My marriage had already felt like a slow leak. Now I realized someone had been cutting the line from both ends. I told her I wanted a divorce, I said suddenly, unsure why I was announcing it like some punchline. She barely reacted. Claimed the apartment. Mocked me. Then said you were even worse at pretending than me. Geneva flinched like I'd slapped her. I'm sorry, I said immediately. I shouldn't have. No, she cut in. You should have. I needed to hear that. Silence stretched between us. Then she stood, walked over, looked up at me with that expression I hadn't seen before. Not warmth, not regret. Something closer to warning. I don't want to be your rebound, she said. And I don't want to be Darla's leftover plan B. If you stay in this space between us, between who she made you and who I thought you were, you're going to destroy us both. So what are you saying? I'm saying, she whispered, you need to leave. And not just my apartment. A pause. Then, you need to leave all of it. The city, the marriage, the mess, me, until you figure out who you are without being someone's target. My throat tightened. And then what? Then maybe we'll find each other again. That night, I packed a single duffel bag. I didn't go home. I didn't tell Darla. I booked a short-term rental 3 towns over and sent Geneva one final message. I don't know who I am yet, but I'm done being who she made me. She didn't reply. And somehow, that silence felt more honest than anything anyone had said in years. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Darla wasn't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. 3 weeks passed before I heard from Darla again. By then, I had carved out a quiet routine in the rental across town. The place smelled like lemon cleaning spray and old wood, and the neighbors never smiled, which suited me fine. I wasn't there to rebuild. I was there to detox. Every morning, I took long walks with no direction. I ate simple meals. I stopped checking social media. Geneva hadn't contacted me since I left her place, and I hadn't messaged her either. That silence between us had become sacred, painful, but necessary. Then came the envelope. No return address. Just my full name in neat cursive I recognized immediately. Darla always had immaculate handwriting, flawless and elegant, like the lies she used to tell when we still played house. I almost didn't open it. Something in my gut told me that whatever was inside wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to detonate. But I opened it anyway. Inside were 3 things: a single typed letter, a printed photo, and a legal document with a bright yellow tab stuck to it. The photo was first. A grainy image, obviously from a phone, showing me and Geneva on her porch. From the angle, we were leaning in close. Not kissing, not touching, but close enough to tell there was something there. It was from the night I'd first gone to her place after Darla's mocking dare. Below the photo was a sticky note in Darla's handwriting. You always were predictable. My hands were already trembling as I unfolded the letter. It read, Silas, it was never about the affair, or Geneva, or even you really. This was about control, and watching what happens when I take mine back. You thought you were making choices. You weren't. Everything you did, I let happen. Everything you confessed, I wanted you to confess. I knew how this would end before you ever stepped out the door. But the fun part was watching you think you had agency. My stomach turned. My first instinct was denial. Paranoia. She couldn't have orchestrated all of it. Geneva had told me about the manipulation, sure, but this letter, this level of planning, it was psychotic. And yet, it sounded exactly like her. I flipped to the 3rd paper. That's when the cold really set in. It was a notice from a lawyer. Apparently, Darla had filed for divorce, but not in a quiet, uncontested way. She was claiming abandonment, mental distress, and even alleged coercive behavior stemming from what she called an inappropriate relationship with a known family member. She was trying to ruin me. And worse, she was trying to drag Geneva down with me. I called the lawyer listed on the form. No answer. Left a message. Then I did what I told myself I wouldn't do. I called Geneva. It rang once. Then twice. Then voicemail. Hey, I said, voice tight. I think she's coming after you. I don't know how much she knows or what she's planning, but she's got that photo. The porch. I swear nothing happened, but I don't think she cares about the truth anymore. I paused. I'm sorry I pulled you into this. You didn't deserve it. If you want to block me after this, I'll understand. I just needed to warn you. I hung up. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the letter, the photo, the twisted smile I now remembered on Darla's face the night she said, "Try my sister." That wasn't an insult. It wasn't a challenge. It was a trapdoor, and I'd stepped straight through it. The next morning, I woke to a knock on the door. It wasn't Geneva. It was a courier. Another envelope. This one from my own employer. Inside was a formal notice. Darla had submitted a complaint to HR, claiming personal boundary violations between her husband and another staff-adjacent family member. Geneva didn't work there, but she had attended a few company mixers as Darla's guest over the years. That was enough. She was trying to get me fired. It was no longer about the marriage, not about emotions. This was scorched earth revenge. And I realized something terrifying. Darla hadn't lost me. She'd released me, just to hunt me. And I'd walked out into the woods thinking I was free. I could have fought her the way she expected, through mud, through rage, through public drama. But I didn't. The morning after the HR letter arrived, I did something Darla never thought I would. I took the day off, printed every message, every note, every photo I had, and went to the one place that terrified me more than a courtroom, my own reflection. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, not to practice a speech or rehearse some clever retaliation. I just looked, really looked, at what she'd made of me, at what I'd allowed. A ghost of a man who had once believed that being patient made him good, that being quiet made him strong, that if you endured long enough, people would change. But Darla hadn't changed. I had. That same day, I met with a lawyer, not just for defense, but for offense. A woman named Camille, sharp as a razor and twice as clean. I told her everything, laid it all out. And for once, I didn't sugarcoat it. No self-blame. No, maybe I misunderstood. Just truth. She leaned back in her chair and said, "Let her play games. You bring facts." So we did. Over the next 3 weeks, Camille dismantled Darla's web like she'd done it 100 times before. She documented the timeline, pulled security footage from the office that proved Geneva was never involved professionally. She even located the original source of the photo Darla had printed. It had been taken by a neighbor across the street from Geneva's apartment, a neighbor who happened to be friends with Darla. We filed for defamation and malicious intent to interfere with employment. Quietly, without threats, without theatrics. Darla got served on a Thursday afternoon while leaving her yoga class. She called me 3 times that night. I didn't answer. By the time her lawyer reached out, her tone had changed from war to panic. She wanted to settle amicably. Suddenly, she regretted how things escalated. She blamed stress, blamed emotional confusion. I didn't engage. I let Camille handle everything. The final agreement was brutal, in my favor. She kept her apartment, but lost any claim to joint property beyond what was fair. The smear campaign? Legally retracted. The HR complaint? Withdrawn. A quiet apology letter? Required by court order. I never read it. What mattered more came weeks later, unexpectedly, from Geneva. It was a message. Simple. No drama. Just, I heard. I'm glad you stood up for yourself. I'm moving to Vermont next month. Found a little place by the lake. Art program for kids. Slow life. If you ever figure out what peace looks like for you, you'll know where to find me. I read that message a dozen times. Not because it made my heart race, but because, for once, it didn't. It just made me smile. Not a wild, victorious grin. A quiet, peaceful one. Like I'd finally walked out of a house that was burning for years and never looked back. Now, I'm rebuilding. I go to work, not out of habit, but with purpose. I reconnected with my brother, started jogging in the mornings, even adopted a dog from a local shelter. His name's Milo. He likes socks and barking at leaves. I haven't messaged Geneva yet. I'm not ready. Not because I don't want to, but because for the first time, I'm not looking for someone to save me from my life. I'm living it. And Darla? She vanished from my orbit like a storm that used to have a name. Let her keep her silence. Let her spin new stories. Because I finally know who I am without her. And that's the ending she never expected. The one where I walked away whole.